welcome to the Iran This Week podcast for the week ending 12 August 2011. Let's head into a review of this week's news about Iran. On 6 April, the Associated Press reported that provincial leaders in Iraq are complaining that Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's government is more interested in doing business with Iran than in promoting Iraqi interests. The two countries last month signed agreements to work together on issues related to culture, science, technology, and transportation, moves that Maliki said signaled a new stage of cooperation. As the Iraqi and Iranian economies grow closer, however, officials in Basra say they believe Iraqi leaders are allowing Iran to take the lead on extracting oil in the border area reservoirs that are accessible to both countries. The Iraqis were sleeping while Iran started taking Iraq's oil along the border, according to Farid Ayubi, a member of the Basra Provincial Council and head of its Oil and Energy Committee. It's a lost cause, Ayubi was quoted as saying. The new gas field has in spot reserves of about 17.5 trillion cubic feet, valued at $133 billion, and is located east of Asaluya, National Iranian Oil Company Managing Director Ahmad Qalabani said. Asaluya, in the southern province of Bushehr, is the base for developing Iran's offshore South Pars field, which Tehran shares with Qatar. It holds an estimated 500 trillion cubic feet, or 8% of the world's gas. The Islamic Republic, which has divided South Pars into 28 phases, has proven gas reserves of 33 trillion cubic meters, the second largest in the world after Russia. Iran consumes almost all of the 600 million cubic meters per day of gas it produces, but hopes to double production and export 250 million cubic meters a day to its neighbors and Europe from 2015 by developing the giant South Pars field. Tehran also announced on Monday an increase of 17 million cubic meters in Phase 10 of South Pars, but the South Pars development has been delayed amid a lack of investment in a country faced with severe gas needs of its own and because of difficulties in procuring the required technology. On 7 August, Reuters reported that an engineering conglomerate belonging to the Revolutionary Guards, Iran's elite military force, will further expand its role in the economic sector, Oil Ministry Rostam Qasemi said on Sunday, days after leaving the company to join the government. Qasemi, who already said that Iran has no need for the foreign companies that have pulled out due to sanctions, told the official IRNA news agency that his former employer, Khatam al-Anbiya, should be used to fill their place. This construction base, Khatam al-Anbiya, should become the replacement for big foreign companies, he said. Khatam al-Anbiya has already stepped into projects formerly under the control of foreign companies, notably replacing the likes of Royal Dutch Shell and Total SA after they pulled out of the giant South Pars gas field in the Gulf under sanctions pressure. Through Khatam al-Anbiya and other affiliates, the Guards have become increasingly involved in the civilian economy, well beyond the infrastructure reconstruction it was initially involved in after the war with Iraq in the 1980s. The Guards, Khatam al-Anbiya and Qasemi himself are all under various sanctions imposed by countries, including the United States and the European Union, that accuse them of involvement in helping Iran develop nuclear technology that could be used for weapons, something Tehran denies it is seeking. Qasemi's approval by an overwhelming majority in parliament last week was seen as a defiant sign to the West and demonstrated the increasing political and economic influence of the military body. Not everybody welcomed his candidacy, with one conservative lawmaker saying it looked like an ominous expansion of the military's power in the Islamic State. Unlike in neighboring countries where the military is withdrawing from the political arena, a reverse trend has started in our country which does not seem to be an auspicious sign, conservative lawmaker Ali Motahari told Parliament before Qasemi's confidence vote on Wednesday. But the Guards Commander-in-Chief, Mohammed Ali Jafari, the man in charge of defending the Islamic Republic from military threats, said on Sunday that his forces had every right to get even more involved in the economy. The Guard Corps should play the role of advancing the economic fronts in the country, he told the semi-official Mehr news agency. On 8 August, AFP reported that an overwhelming majority of the U.S. Senate urged President Barack Obama on Tuesday to impose crippling sanctions on Iran's financial system in a bid to hinder its suspect nuclear program. The time has come to impose crippling sanctions on Iran's financial system by cutting off the CBI, the Central Bank of Iran. 92 of the chamber's 100 members, Democrats and Republicans, wrote to Obama in a letter. Republican Senator Mark Khalq and Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer led the effort, saying it was time to increase the economic pressure on Tehran with a comprehensive strategy to address the Islamic Republic's defiance of global sanctions aimed at forcing it to freeze its uranium enrichment program. If our key allies are willing to join, we believe this step can be even more effective, the senators wrote. The senators charged that Iran's central bank lies at the center of Iran's circumvention strategy for ducking U.S. and multilateral sanctions, which heavily target the country's financial and energy sectors. We urge you to strongly consider imposing U.S. sanctions against the CBI and to encourage key allies to join us in this important action, the senators wrote. On 10 August, the Korean Herald reported that for Koreans, Iran is quite an interesting country, where Korean-made electronic goods and automotive products have carved out a significant market share, and Korean dramas have gained enormous popularity. Against expectations, anti-American sentiment was not prevalent among most people here. Those in political circles, however, apparently bear grudges against the U.S., which has long maintained economic sanctions against Iran. During a week-long press tour organized by the Iranian government last month, a South Korean media contingent was able to get a first-hand look at Iranian culture and society, looking at street banners and billboards that advertise South Korean products. The 9 journalists could feel the strong presence of South Korea in this Middle Eastern nation. Korean electronic companies have ranked first or second in the Iranian market. The import sanctions on products made in the U.S. might have affected the sales of Korean products here, although it is true that the quality of Korean merchandise is high, said Mohsen, a 32-year-old office worker. Iran is a weighty trade partner for South Korea in terms of trade volume. Last year, this amounted to some $11.5 billion worth of trade. The Korean wave, or Hallyu, has also made significant forays into Iran. Korean period dramas, Jumong in particular, were smash hits. Jumong, the founding monarch of Korea's ancient Goguryeo kingdom, has become the most popular TV drama representing Korea in Iran, with its viewer ratings hovering around 80 to 90%. The two countries have many things in common from the cultural standpoint. As they do now in Iran, Korean women used to wear long skirts and headscarves similar to hijabs. Historically, both have also been invaded by outside forces many times, said Chang Byung-ok, Iran expert at Hankook University of Foreign Studies. Such historical and cultural similarities were shared through Korean dramas, which seem to have greatly appealed to the Iranian public. Despite such a great potential for economic and cultural exchanges, experts voice concerns that they could be restricted by the chilly ties between the U.S. and Iran. Economic exchanges and cooperation between South Korea and Iran would hinge on the U.S.-Iran relations. What had also drawn the attention of the press contingent was that American culture and products have been loved by young Iranians who appear to hold little grudge against the U.S., which has been at the vanguard of sanctions against Tehran. Wearing Nike sneakers and tight diesel jeans, Salah, age 19, said U.S. products are popular in Iran despite their high prices. I like their products, which are of high quality, jeans, cars, and so forth. The only problem is their high prices, he said, holding a can of Coke in his hand. I know that the U.S. has imposed sanctions on us, but positive thinking is important. Life isn't just a heaven. There could be advantages or disadvantages for all to go through. On 12 August, Radio Free Europe reported that the Shia clerical regime in Iran appears to be intensifying its repression of the country's Sunnis under the guise of reorganizing their seminaries. This is being done through the full implementation of a memorandum issued in 2008 by the Supreme Cultural Revolution Council, a Qom-based conservative-dominated body whose 41 members are appointed by the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad chairs the body, although any decisions made by the council can be overruled by Khamenei. In 2008, the council issued a memorandum titled Bylaws of the Councils for Planning Curricula of Sunni Seminaries, or CPCSS, which has 10 articles and 4 addendums. According to one of the articles, all Sunni seminaries must be managed by the council under the guidance of Ayatollah Khamenei's representatives. On June 21, Hojat ul-Islam Abbas Farzi, the secretary of the CPCSS, told Fars news agency that 98% of Sunni seminaries in the country had been reorganized, restructured, and registered. The aim of the CPCSS is to give services to Sunni clerics by evaluating their qualification, issuing appropriate certificates, and increasing their allowance from September of this year. Based on an edict of Ayatollah Khamenei, he added that all Sunni seminaries, as well as maintaining their own traditions, should be equipped with up-to-date knowledge of the world. Prior to the formation of the CPCSS, the clerical establishment, at Khamenei's behest, established two grand Islamic centers in the provinces of Kurdistan and Golestan with the aim of paving the way for, quote, the cooperation of Sunni clerics with representatives of the supreme leader, unquote. Most Kurds, Baluchis, and Turkmen in Iran are Sunnis. They make up about 10% of the population, and most of them live in the provinces of West Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, Kermanshah, Golestan, and Sistan-va Baluchistan. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic accords Sunni Muslims higher status than other religious minorities in the country. Officially, according to Article 12 of the Constitution, full respect should be given to other schools of Islam, and they should be free to practice their religious rites and rituals. But this is far from the reality. Iran's Sunni Muslims experience discrimination and marginalization in their own country, where Shiite Islam is the official state religion and the Shia hold political power. So far, Sunnis have not been allowed to build mosques in major cities such as Tehran, and there has not been a single Sunni among government ministers and deputy ministers since 1979. In an August the 5th ceremony in Mujaheddin, the center of Sistan and Baluchistan province, mid-ranking Shiite cleric Hojatul Islam Ahmad Barati was appointed to head the office tasked with reviewing the curricula of Sunni seminaries in the province. Conducting the seminary, Ayatollah Abbas Ali Soleimani, the supreme leader's representative in the province, said that the reorganization of some Sunni seminaries would bring them in line with the other religious schools in the country. Teachers of some Sunni seminaries, with their proclivity towards Wahhabism and their deviant teaching, are brainwashing their students, Soleimani said. If we can broaden the horizon of these deceived young students, we would definitely stop them from indulging in acts of barbarism and committing crimes, he added, referring to acts of terrorism and suicide bombings, including those of the Sunni militant group Jundullah that bedeviled the province in the last few years. The decision of the clerical regime to reorganize the Sunni schools in the province has infuriated many local scholars. Our national pact is the Constitution. The Constitution grants us religious freedom, and therefore we cannot leave the running of our mosques and seminaries to the government, said Zahedan Friday prayer leader Molavi Abdul Hamid. We cannot trust the government on this issue. Hamid rejected the interference of the clerical regime in Sunni affairs and identified religious beliefs as a red line for Sunnis and Shia. If the government wants to supervise, then we accept it. We obey the government and the exalted leader, but we cannot leave our religious matters to you, he said. These matters should never be left in the hands of a government, be it the Islamic government or any government after it. Do not try to frighten us with jail or summons. God knows that we are not even scared of death. On 12 August, CNN.com reported that given its conflicted relationship with Iran, the United Arab Emirates has served as a kind of petri dish in which to test American policies towards Tehran. The Emirates are a prime target of international sanctions enforcement, and U.S. officials have invested considerable time and resources trying to rein in Dubai's thriving illicit trade with Iran. The UAE is also one of the largest U.S. arms export markets. Abu Dhabi has bought some of the most sophisticated and expensive weaponry available. What's more, in the absence of an official U.S. diplomatic presence in Tehran, Washington uses the UAE, home to some 450,000 Iranians, the second largest Iranian diaspora community in the world, as its primary vantage point from which to observe and interpret Iran's internal political and popular dynamics. As Tehran inches closer to nuclear weapons capability and the U.S.-Iran rivalry for regional power intensifies, the UAE finds it increasingly difficult to reconcile its internal contradictions. It has thus tried to walk a fine line between satisfying its ally and protector, the United States, without provoking its looming neighbor, Iran. At the heart of the Iran-UAE-US dynamic lies a simple irony. Iranian officials want the United States out of the Persian Gulf because they fear and mistrust it, yet the Gulf Arab nations want the United States to stay because they fear and mistrust Iran. And that concludes the news roundup for this week. Please send any feedback on those stories to IranThisWeek@artkeller.com. And now it's time for questions and comments from the desk of Art Keller. This week, the Christian Science Monitor ran an article entitled Iranian Groups Big Money Push to Get Off the U.S. Terrorist List. It was too long to cover in the news roundup, but I did want to hit a few highlights of the story as a prelude to my own commentary about the MEK. The Monitor reported that with a decision due within weeks by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former U.S. four-star generals, intelligence chiefs, governors, and political heavyweights are calling for the U.S. government to take the Mujaheddin Khalq off the terror list it shares with Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. Many of these former high-ranking U.S. officials who represent the full political spectrum have been paid tens of thousands of dollars to speak in support of the MEK. These include Michael Mukasey, former Attorney General, Andrew Card, former White House Chief of Staff, Tom Ridge, former Homeland Security Chief, Howard Dean, former Chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Lee Hamilton, former co-chair of the 9/11 Commission, former Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Peter Pace, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO Wesley Clark, former CIA Chiefs James Woolsey, Portergoss, and Michael Hayden, John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Louis Freeh, former FBI Director, General James Conway, former Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Hugh Shelton, and former Mayor Rudy Giuliani. I remain baffled and amazed that such a prominent roster of speakers would speak in support of a group which assassinated at least 6 U.S. military advisors and citizens in Iran in the 1970s and supported the Islamic Revolution and then the seizure of the American Embassy in 1979. And which then tried to block any deal with what it then called the U.S., this satanic force threatening the world, the main adversary. U.S. government documents frequently use the term cult-like when describing the MEK and describe years of ideological training for members akin to brainwashing. The MEK has long denied that it is a cult and routinely charges critics with being agents of the Islamic Republic. The MEK says it renounced violence in 2001 after claiming responsibility for 350 attacks in 2000 and 2001, according to a RAND tabulation. It is not known to have carried out any attacks for several years, though a 2004 FBI report found that the group was, quote, currently actively involved in planning and executing acts of terrorism. That conclusion was based on wiretaps of calls between MEK bases and headquarters in Iraq, France, and Los Angeles that discussed specific acts of terrorism to include bombings and were corroborated by French intelligence and German police wiretaps, according to the FBI report. The Monitor story goes on to detail the various front organizations that the MEK has used to funnel payments to all of the prominent speakers named in the story, skirting the U.S. guidelines on terrorist financing. But the biggest question about the MEK's recent activities remains unresolved by the Monitor's story, excellent though it was. What is the ultimate source of the MEK's money? The massive lobbying campaign appears to be costing the MEK tens of millions of dollars. So who is financing this unprecedented publicity push? The MEK claims to have garnered the funds from internet fundraising, but those are frankly beyond belief. The MEK is a widely despised group among Iranian expats, unlikely to receive tens of millions of dollars from internet donors. Whatever the ultimate source of the funds, I would have thought that any of the prominent speakers named in the Monitor's story would want to understand more about the history of the organization whose money they're accepting before putting money in their pockets that came from a terrorist group that has killed Americans and which continues brainwashing practices in Camp Ashraf in Iraq to this very day. And that concludes the podcast for the week ending August 12th, 2011. Please send your questions and comments to IranThisWeek@artkeller.com. Goodbye and Khoda Hafez.